I'm Mabel. Sitting in the lawyer's office, I'm surrounded by a tense silence. My siblings, Ethan, Olivia, and Noah, are here, but the atmosphere is thick with unease. The will lies open on the desk, and the weight of what's about to be revealed hangs heavy in the air. My mother, Amelia, was a remarkable woman. She was a schoolteacher, known for her patience and kindness in the small town of Millfield. She dedicated her life to her students and her family, even after my father left when I was young. 14 months ago, Mom's health started to decline. She was diagnosed with heart disease, and it became clear that she needed more care. I worked as an accountant at a local firm, and every evening after work, I'd drive the 10 minutes to her house. I'd bring her dinner, usually lasagna on Wednesdays and chicken soup on Fridays. She never asked me to come, but I knew she needed me. Ethan, the oldest at 40, lived in the city with his wife, Lily, and managed a tech startup. He was always busy, always had an excuse. When Mom's medical bills started piling up, I called him. He said the business was going through a rough patch and they couldn't afford to help. So, I paid the bills. When Mom needed someone to take her to her doctor's appointments, I called him again. He said he'd try, but he never did. I took her instead. Olivia, 38, was a travel blogger. She lived a life of adventure, constantly on the move. She was hard to reach, often only responding to texts. Mom called her 15 times in those 14 months, and she answered only 3 times. The first time, she said she was thinking of coming home soon. The second time, she said she was in the middle of a new project and couldn't make it. The third time, she promised to be there for Mom's birthday, but she never showed up. She sent a postcard instead, with a generic message. Noah, the youngest at 35, worked at a local garage. He was Mom's favorite, and she always worried about him. He borrowed $5,000 from Mom a few years ago to start a small side business, but he never paid it back. Mom never said anything about it, always believing that he'd come through. He visited Mom less than Ethan. He'd stop by once in a while, but he never stayed long. One Thursday in February, Mom was quieter than usual. She looked at me as I unpacked the groceries and said, "I need to talk to Mr. Thompson about my will." Mr. Thompson was our family lawyer, an old man with a kind face. He'd handled my parents' affairs for years. I nodded and said, "Okay, Mom." She said, "I want to make sure everything is clear." I knew she meant it. Mom was always precise, always planned ahead. The next morning, she called Mr. Thompson. I drove her to his office the following Monday. She went in alone, and I sat in the waiting room, reading an old magazine. 40 minutes later, she came out, tucking a manila envelope into her purse. She said, "Let's go get some lunch." We went to our favorite diner, and she ordered a burger. She didn't mention the will again for a long time. That was Mom. She made her decisions carefully and didn't like to talk about them until she was sure. Mom passed away on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there when it happened. I'd left her house the night before, after helping her into bed and making sure she was comfortable. Her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, called me at 6:30 a.m. She said Mom looked peaceful, but I couldn't help but feel guilty that I wasn't there. I drove to Mom's house as fast as I could. I sat with her, holding her hand, and said all the things I wished I'd said before. Then, I made the calls. Ethan answered on the third ring. I said, "Mom passed away this morning." He was silent for a moment, then asked, "Did she have any life insurance?" I closed my eyes and said, "I'll send you the details." Olivia didn't answer. I left a voicemail, and she texted back an hour later. She said, "I'm so sorry. I'll try to come for the funeral." I knew she probably wouldn't. Noah didn't answer either. His voicemail was full. I texted him, but he didn't reply. I sat on Mom's porch, in the old rocking chair that she loved. It creaked with every movement, just like it always had. I called Mr. Thompson. When I sat down in front of his desk, he took off his glasses and said, "I'm sorry, Mabel. Your mother was a wonderful woman." I nodded and said, "She was." He opened a file drawer and pulled out the manila envelope I'd seen Mom tuck into her purse months ago. He read the will to me slowly. The estate included Mom's house, which was worth approximately $250,000, a savings account of $35,000, and some personal property, like her jewelry and furniture, worth around $7,000. But there were also medical debts of $10,000 and the cost of the funeral. The will had a condition. If all 4 of us children participated in the funeral arrangements, defined as being present at the service and contributing to the burial costs, the estate would be divided equally. If any of us failed to meet these conditions, our share would be redistributed to the ones who did. I thought about Ethan's question about insurance, Olivia's conditional promise, and Noah's silence. I told Mr. Thompson, I want to give them a chance. I'll tell them the estate is mostly debt. If they show up for Mom. If they don't, then the will does what Mom intended. That evening, I sent a group text to my siblings. I said, I met with Mr. Thompson about Mom's estate. It's mostly medical debt and the funeral costs. There isn't much else. The funeral is on Saturday at the local church. I could use some help with the arrangements and the costs. Let me know. Ethan replied first, saying, "That's tough. Lily and I are stretched thin right now. It's not our problem if Mom left nothing. You should talk to Mr. Thompson about what the creditors will take." Olivia replied an hour later. She said, "I'm so sad. I can't afford a flight right now. I'll send flowers." I knew she probably wouldn't follow through. Noah read the message, but he didn't reply. I started planning the funeral by myself. I chose a simple casket, costing $3,000. The burial plot was already paid for. Mom had bought it years ago, next to Dad's empty plot. The vault was $1,200. The service fee at the church was $250, the flowers were $350, the obituary in the local paper was $200, the programs were $80, and the transportation from the funeral home to the church was $400. The headstone would cost another $1,800, but I could wait on that. The total came to $7,080. I paid it all. I had some savings, not much, but enough. The funeral director, Mr. Harris, was kind and understanding. He walked me through the process, and at the end, he asked, "Will the family be splitting the cost?" I said, "It's just me." He nodded, as if he'd heard that before. A few days before the funeral, I tried Ethan one more time. He answered, and I could hear the TV in the background. I said, "The funeral is on Saturday. I really need you there." He sighed and said, "Mabel, Lily and I are in the middle of a big project. We can't come." I said, "Okay, Ethan." That night, I saw a post on social media. Ethan was at a fancy restaurant, having dinner with Lily. He looked happy, like he didn't have a care in the world. I took a screenshot and saved it. On the day of the funeral, I arrived at the church early. There were 30 chairs set up, but only 10 people showed up. Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Thompson, a few of Mom's old friends, and me. No Ethan, no Olivia, no Noah. Before the service started, the pastor said, Amelia left a note. She asked me to read it at her funeral, no matter how many people came. He unfolded the note and read, I asked God for good children. He gave me 4. One of them was always there for me. I knew she meant me. I felt a lump in my throat as I listened to those words. I gave the eulogy, talking about Mom's life, her kindness, and her love for her family. After the burial, we went back to Mom's house for the reception. The neighbors had brought food, and I stood in the kitchen, thanking people and accepting hugs. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. He texted, "How did it go?" I didn't reply. I called Mr. Thompson and said, "None of them came." He said, "I know. I'll proceed with the will as written." A few days later, Mr. Thompson sent certified letters to my siblings, notifying them of the probate process. The next morning, my phone started ringing. Ethan called first. He sounded angry. He said, "I got the letter. It says the estate is worth over $270,000. You told us there was nothing." I said, "I told you there was mostly debt. I asked you to come for Mom, not for the money." Olivia called next. She was crying, saying, "I didn't know. I thought there was nothing." I said, "Mom asked for your presents, not your money." Noah texted, asking to talk. I told him the reading of the will was on Thursday at Mr. Thompson's office. On the day of the reading, we all met at Mr. Thompson's office. Ethan was dressed in a suit, looking like he was ready for a fight. Olivia had flown in from wherever she was, looking tired and disheveled. Noah was quiet, looking down at his feet. Mr. Thompson read the will again, explaining the condition. Ethan got angry, saying it was unfair. He said he was going to hire a lawyer to contest the will. Olivia started crying again, saying she was sorry. Noah just sat there, not saying a word. Mr. Thompson then pulled out another letter that Mom had written. He read it to us. It said, "To my children, I love you. I always have. But I also know who was there for me when I needed them. I forgive you for not being there, but I won't distribute my estate in a way that doesn't reflect your actions." Olivia broke down completely. Ethan was silent, but I could see the anger in his eyes. Noah finally spoke up and said, "I know I should have been there. I'm sorry." Mr. Thompson also informed us that Mom had forgiven Noah's debt of $5,000. Noah closed his eyes and said, "She was always so kind." In the end, Ethan did hire a lawyer, but his case was quickly dismissed. The court upheld Mom's will, saying the conditions were reasonable. I moved into Mom's house. It was quiet, but it was filled with memories. I kept the rocking chair on the porch, and every evening, I'd sit in it, thinking about Mom. People ask me if I feel guilty for getting the entire estate. I don't. Mom left it to me because I was the one who showed up. I was the one who was there for her when she needed me the most. It's not about the money. It's about the love and the memories. And I know Mom is proud of me.